Okay, so we are on day 4 of our research project. And again, we're coming back to revisit this text because we are focused on John Muir. I know that you, boys and girls, you are working and researching and learning more about an immigrant that you chose. But today, our goal is to really dig deep into the text features that are included in this section of text that we are focused on. And think to ourselves, if I were the author and illustrator of this section of the text, what might be an additional nonfiction text feature that I could add to help enhance or improve this section of the text? So the first thing we're going to do for my immigrant, John Muir, is look back at some of the nonfiction text features that are present here in this section of the text and really think about maybe one that I could add in that would help support what I'm learning. So I see here the heading Scotland 1849, so I know that he's from Scotland. I have a little bit of extra information. I've got a photograph and a caption that's showing his house where he grew up in Scotland. Then when I turn the page, I can see a map here showing the route that they took once they arrived in New York, then to Buffalo, and then continuing on to Wisconsin. Remember, they were in search of that really great rich soil and farmland. I also see down here, there's a second map that's showing his home here in Dunbar and the journey that they made across the Atlantic Ocean to arrive in New York. So I have two maps here, and they're kind of showing a close-up view, and then I also have a caption down here that's describing both of these maps. When I continue on, I saw that hand-drawn illustration. Remember, John Muir actually drew this. It's a picture of the house where he arrived in Wisconsin. There's headings. I know that right here it's describing the work that he did for his father when he was an 11-year-old boy. If I continue, I'm now noticing this photograph, and this is where it talks about more into his adulthood and then the effect that coming to America had on him. Remember, he starts to help create these national park systems, and this was a picture of some of those giant sequoia trees that are named after him in the state of California. On the last page, under this section about the long walk, that talks about where John made the decision to really create his own path in life, and he journeyed from Indiana to Florida. And it even goes on to show you a photograph of what is now Yosemite National Park in California. And there's this little blurb or text box or caption, I guess if you want to call it, down here at the bottom, where it's giving you more information about John Muir and his love of nature, right? And how he went on to take part in preserving or saving many of these beautiful places, such as Yosemite National Park. So I've got a lot of photographs here, and I've got a lot of captions, so I don't think I would include one of those. I'm thinking back to some of the nonfiction text features that I've been studying with my teacher throughout this week and even the last 2 weeks. I see the illustration. I know that there are headings. There's even a bold word here. And I see the map. But I'm wondering, what are some others that I could include? Well, a couple ideas came to mind when I was reading through this, and I actually jotted those down as I was flipping through the pages talking with you guys just now. And I thought to myself, well, there is a map here, and I can see the route that was taken. It's really focused on the routes, right? All the way over to Wisconsin, and then from Scotland traveling over to America. But I thought to myself, well, something that I could include might be a world map. And the purpose for me including a picture of a world map might be to show where Scotland is located in relation to the other continents, right? And where that's located on the world map. So that might be one option. The other option that I was kind of brainstorming might be a timeline of his life and his journey to America. Timelines are a great way to show the sequence or the order in which these events occurred. And I think I'm actually going to challenge myself, and I am going to create a timeline of his life and his journey here to America. So now I'm going to switch over, and I have my brochure. And again, we're working on now this flap as part of our trifold. You guys have already completed these 3 sections. I included a clean one so that it wasn't like written on, because I'm having to use a really dark marker so that you guys can see what I'm writing. But this is the portion where we're actually going to be working today. So you can see I've decided I'm going to include a timeline of John Muir's life. Now, timelines could, you could turn it this way, and we're going to include some major events, maybe like the day he was born, maybe like the day that he left Scotland to come to America, perhaps the day that he arrived in America. Some timelines might even include down here the very last date, if we're talking about someone's life, perhaps like the day that this person passed away or died. So now I've got the tricky part in front of me, boys and girls. I have to go back in the text now to find some of these major events that my immigrant experienced. And I have to decide what I would like to add to my timeline. We know that timelines usually include dates, and I have some dates here, so some dates I will include, but we're going to kind of walk through this thought process together. So when I look at the very first page here under this heading Nature Boy, I can see that it does include when and where he was born. So that might be like the first date. So I'm just going to draw a line. My timeline, I'm going to do it vertically going down my page so that it's just easier for me to read later. And I'm going to include this date. It looks like he was born in 1838. So I'm going to include John Muir is born in Dunbar, Scotland. Not really sure why I capitalized the B on born. Now, when I continued reading in the text, I saw another date, so that kind of caught my attention. It said here, one night in 1849, John's father came in with exciting news. The family was moving to the United States. So that's a date that I definitely want to include on my timeline. And I'm going to alternate just so my text doesn't get too crowded. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to record that date, 1849. And the information that I read was that John's father, and I can put it in my own words, shares the news that they are moving. So I've got 2 really important dates here. Now, when I continued reading on, I'm going to turn the page because I didn't see any more dates. There was something up here, and we talked about this when I modeled that like first-hand and second-hand account. It says here, it took 6 weeks to cross the ocean by ship. So I could include that. I'm assuming we're still in the year 1849. However, I'm just going to put 6 weeks later. So I don't know for sure if it's 1849 still. It could have already been 1850 depending on like the month that they were in here. But I'm just going to include 6 weeks later, John's family arrives in New York. Another important date that's related to his journey as an immigrant coming to America. When I continue on, let's take a look. This section of my text talks about, again, why they were coming and what they were planning to do. Then I come down here and I learned that at 11 years old, he's working for his father. I guess I could include that on my timeline. Now this is the tricky part because typically we know that he's getting older, right? It obviously is coming after he's arrived in New York, but we don't necessarily have a date. So we might include something like at 11 years old, John is working for his father. I don't see any more information really on this page other than that he really enjoys nature and he's really intrigued by wildlife. So I'm going to turn the page, and I know now I'm kind of towards the end. I'm getting more into his adulthood. I know that he spent hours again talking and discovering wildlife around his home. He's studying birds and fish and snakes and bees. He goes on and he builds a boat, but these aren't necessarily major events. Not that really have to do with his immigration to America. He wants to learn to swim. That's not really an event that I would include on a timeline. There's really nothing here, guys, that I would include. There are not any major life events. So now I'm on the last page. And this is where I learned that he's now at this point an adult. He's working in a factory and some kind of accident occurred where he almost goes completely blind. And then when he recovered, that's when he decides to follow and create his own path, basically, following that love of nature. Then he goes on to really work to preserve some of these beautiful parks. So down here at the bottom of my timeline, really my last major event, I'm going to include after an accident at work, John follows his own path and I'm going to say something like works to preserve nature or works to preserve parks. And we know we're talking about our national parks. So again, just a reminder, you are going to now think about your immigrant and their journey. Maybe you want to include a date like their birthday, if it's included in your section of the text. Maybe you want to include when they left to come over to America. Maybe something about how long it took. How long was this journey? And then perhaps what they did when they arrived, and then even including something about when they've become an adult. Again, you don't have to do a timeline like I did. You can choose maybe to do another nonfiction text feature. You just want to look through your section of the text carefully and think about the text features that you've learned and then what text features are included in your section of the text. I challenge you to do a timeline. I think that's a really great way for you to really learn more about your immigrant and think about their journey from start to finish as they decided to come to America. All right, guys. You're doing a great job.